Once upon a time, in the beautiful village of Osisi, known for its vast array of healing herbs, lived a 32-year-old spinster named Nkem. In her early youth, when she was required to be married by tradition, she had several suitors, but none of them sparked her interest. And despite her beauty, the men did not bother to pursue her further after their first encounter with her because they felt intimidated by her intelligence. Nkem's late father, Agu, was a scholar who sailed around the world seeking knowledge, and every time he returned, he would bring ancient books for her to read and tell her stories about the countries he had visited. When her mother passed away, Agu retired early to care for his daughter, but in the confines of their little home, he would educate her on several things, from English language to many other subjects. In Kem, there is so much to see outside our village, he would tell her whenever they concluded their conversations. And when Agu passed away, Nkem felt as if the ground had been pulled from beneath her feet. Agu was not just her father, he was her mentor, her guide, and her closest confidant. Aside from the memories they shared, all she had left were his books, which she immersed herself in daily. As she reached the age to be married, men began to approach her, seeking her hand. Even though she was very beautiful, the men soon saw that Nkem was very smart and curious about the world. When they talked to her, they often felt nervous or not good enough. Then they would lose interest because they saw she was too smart and independent. Nkem, you are so beautiful, many of them would say, admiring her. Thank you, she would reply politely. Then she would try to talk about something interesting. Have you ever noticed how tree branches look like our lungs? The men would often look confused. Um, no, I haven't, one would say. Yes, she would continue excited. It's amazing how nature looks like our own bodies, don't you think? But the suitors would shift uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. They were used to women who spoke of domestic matters, not science or nature. Nkem would smile kindly, but inside, she knew that marriage to these men was out of the question. She was nothing like their mothers, who were expected to know little and remain submissive. As she grew older, she surrendered to her fate of remaining unmarried. Nkem decided to spend her days educating the younger generation of all she knew. Most mothers prevented their female children from attending her lectures. Do you want to remain unmarried like her? She would teach you all that nonsense that will never be useful. And the men would concur, saying, we need women who can run a household, not discuss books and foreign lands. But Nkem did not care about what they said because she was content with her life. One sunny day, Nkem was sitting in her classroom when she noticed unusual movement outside. Villagers were passing by in large groups. She tried to ignore it, but the more she tried, the louder and more frequent the groups became. Curiosity got the better of her, so she stepped out, closed her classroom door, and asked someone what was happening. Have you heard? They say visitors have come from a faraway land looking for our herbs, a woman replied. Normally, Nkem wouldn't have been interested, but the mention of the words faraway land intrigued her. Where are they? She asked, her eyes widening. The villagers told her they were at the palace, and without hesitation, Nkem began to walk quickly towards it. When she arrived at the king's palace, she pushed through the crowd to get a better look, and when she finally saw the visitors, her heart warmed. They were indeed from a distant place, unlike any visitors she had seen before. They were not the usual visitors who looked like them from neighboring communities, nor did they resemble the white men who had come years ago to preach religion. These visitors had smooth, clear skin with a fair tone. Their eyes were almond shaped, giving them an exotic look that intrigued the villagers. Their hair was dark and straight, neatly styled, and they carried themselves with a quiet dignity and respect that impressed the villagers. Their attire was different as well, consisting of simple yet elegant clothing that was unfamiliar but intriguing. These visitors had traveled all the way from Korea in Asia to seek unique herbs found only in the eastern part of Nigeria, specifically in Osisi. Inkem watched as the king officially welcomed the visitors and asked the villagers to make them feel at home. He introduced them by name, and as he did, a few villagers giggled, but not Nkem. She had read about these people in her father's books and knew about their naming customs. She decided she would meet the visitors the next afternoon to introduce herself and offer any assistance she could to make their 7 month stay in Osisi fruitful. The following morning, Inkem woke up with excitement. The day reminded her of the times her father returned from his long travels and eagerly shared all the knowledge he had gained. She decided to go into the forest to gather herbs to demonstrate her knowledge to the visitors. All night, she rehearsed some Korean phrases her father had taught her in the past. 안녕하세요. 안녕. 떡볶이. Oma. She giggled to herself as she remembered how eventful her night had been. Nkem waltzed into the forest and began gathering herbs as quickly as she could. Once she was done, she started making her way out, but suddenly she noticed a man on the other side of the forest. Though he couldn't see her, she recognized him immediately. He was one of the Korean visitors the king had introduced, and if her memory served her correctly, he was the leader of the group, and his name was Jinho. He seemed engrossed in his work, taking notes and examining herbs. Inkem quickly hid behind a tree, watching him. She wanted to approach him and offer her assistance, but as she gathered her courage, she began to feel shy. She took several deep breaths, trying to muster the courage, but it wasn't happening. So she decided to leave the forest and stick to her plan of visiting them later. Maybe she felt shy because she hadn't expected to see him. But just as she was about to leave, her leg got tangled in a creeping vine and she fell flat, letting out a loud scream. The noise alerted Jinho, and he quickly abandoned the herbs and rushed in her direction. Are you okay? He asked as he helped her up. Inkem, unusually tongue tied, just stared at him, thinking of a way to offer her assistance. English? Jinho asked, interrupting her thoughts. Suddenly, she became upset. Why would he speak to her in monosyllables? She straightened herself and replied, Of course I can speak English. He quickly apologized when he noticed her annoyance. I'm sorry, I did not mean it that way. I only learned to speak English 3 years ago. Inkem felt annoyed with herself, wondering why she was so nasty to him. She apologized, and he smiled back, claiming no offense. Instantly, she introduced herself and volunteered to assist his team during their stay in her village. I am a teacher and very versatile in many things, including herbal medicine. I'm sure I can help you pick leaves, grind them into fine powder. Whatever it is, I can do it. Jinho smiled as she spoke. You are very expressive. When you speak, you use your hands, eyes, everything. It's wonderful to watch. It will be lovely to work with you, he said. Inkem was excited. They spoke a bit longer and she introduced herself properly to him, and he did the same. Then, suddenly, she remembered the herbs she had come to pick to show him and his group. They were scattered on the ground from her fall. She bent down and began to gather the bundles. Jinho realized what she was doing and helped her pick them up too. As he did, he stopped at a yellow colored herb. I have been looking for this all morning. Did you know that when you mix this with the bitter leaf, it is the perfect cure for a stomach ache? He said excitedly. Inkem shared in his excitement, happy she was already providing value. But she could not help but share her thoughts on the yellow herb. That's a wonderful mixture, but I can assure you that it is not as potent as the Nchaka leaf. It will cure the pain in such a way that you would forget you ever had it, Nkem said to him. Jinho frowned slightly, shaking his head. I don't think so. I've been studying the yellow herb for years, and it is part of the reason I came all the way here. It is a cure for many illnesses. Nkem's eyes narrowed. With all due respect, Mr. Jinho, I have lived in this village all my life and I know our herbs. The Nchaka leaf has properties that surpass the yellow herb. Jinho's expression became more serious. And with all due respect, Nkem, I have dedicated my life to the study of herbs. The yellow herb's benefits are scientifically proven. Science doesn't know everything, Nkem fired back, her voice rising. Some things are known through tradition and experience. You cannot dismiss that just because you haven't read it in a book. Jinho's jaw tightened. I am not dismissing your traditions, but you must understand that the yellow herb has been tested and its efficacy documented. They both stood there, clearly upset with each other, neither willing to back down. Well, I just remembered that the kids I teach have a test coming up, so I won't be able to assist your team anymore because I will be very busy, Nkem said, picking up her basket and walking away. Jinho remained where he was, unapologetic. He refused to let someone who was versatile in many things tell him about something he had devoted his life to. A week passed, and Jinho began to settle into the village. He could often be found working diligently in a central location the king had provided, a large shed under the mango trees. Some village ladies swooned over him and his colleagues, while others remained loyal to their local men. Inkem would occasionally pass by on her way to her classroom, and her eyes would often lock with Jinho's before she would quickly look away, muttering to herself, I'm not willing to work with a man who is not willing to learn. One day, during a heavy rainfall in Osisi, Nkem was running late to her classroom. When she finally arrived, she saw Jinho interacting with the children who were excited to have him around. Hello, she greeted him politely. I think you are in the wrong room. Jinho smiled and said, I came looking for you. Remember you told me you are a teacher. It was not hard to find you. Nkem, he began. I've been thinking. It's okay to disagree. I'm sorry if I came off as headstrong. I guess I felt frustrated that something I have been working on all my life seemed to be false. Inkem felt his frustration and replied, It's not false. The yellow herb is indeed powerful, but there is something more potent. See it as a gift and explore what it has to offer. I also apologize. I could have been kinder. They both laughed, breaking the tension. Jinho then asked, Would you like to explore the Nchaka leaf together? Nkem agreed instantly because every time she passed his workshop, she secretly longed to be there, working alongside the team. Now, she finally had the chance. Nkem began to work with the team as they explored new herbs. She became quite close to Jinho, who ensured she knew she was an important member of the team. Her opinions always counted, and their conversations grew more personal. They shared stories and dreams beyond herbal medicine and often exchanged food. They marveled at the similarities between Korean kimchi and Igbo uba, both fermented vegetable dishes. Most times, they would lounge under a tree, eating jollof rice or bibimbap, which were both rice based meals. They also taught each other bits of their languages, and they would laugh at themselves whenever they got the pronunciations wrong. One day, in the workshop, a shocking visitor arrived. It was Urenna, the princess of Osisi. Jinho went out to welcome her, and after a chat, he brought her in, introducing her to the team. This is Princess Urenna, and she will be working with us now. Everyone welcomed her, and work began as usual. Nkem couldn't help but glance at Urenna often. She had never seen the princess before, as Urenna spent most of her time indoors, attended to by her maids. Many suitors from distant lands sought her hand in marriage, and Nkem finally understood why. Urenna was stunningly beautiful. Later in the day, Jinho found his way to Nkem for one of their chats, but just as they settled down to discuss, Urenna interrupted them. Jinho, can you please show me the herbs you put together for joint pain? She asked. He excused himself and followed the princess. Nkem felt disappointed. Her conversations with Jinho had become the highlight of her day, but she consoled herself, thinking, we can speak tomorrow and many other days. However, as days passed, Urena demanded more of Jinho's attention, even bringing lunch from the palace for them to share. Jinho tried his best to steal moments with Nkem, sometimes waiting until evening to walk her home. One day, Nkem waited for Jinho to walk her home as usual, but he did not show up. As she walked home alone, she missed their conversations and wondered if Urena was with him. She finally admitted her feelings for him, but she knew it was of no use. He had not shown interest, and his stay in the village was not permanent. The next morning, as she stepped out to go to her classroom, Jinho was sitting outside waiting for her, and Nkem blushed as she saw him. I'm sorry I kept you waiting yesterday, he apologized. Nkem nodded. Was it Urena? She seems to want your company a lot, she instigated. Jinho smiled gently. It was not Urena, it was Ike, the village chief. He came to thank me for the sleeping herbs, and we got caught up in our conversation. And you notice everything except how much I love your company. Nkem shyly looked at him. Have you not noticed how much I like you? He asked her. Nkem looked at him firmly this time. I am a grown woman. I do not sit around making assumptions. Jinho knew she was right. He had been waiting for the perfect time to tell her he liked her since they met in the forest, but he was afraid of scaring her away. I really like you, Nkem, and would love to court you, he said. Nkem giggled and responded, well, you would have to give me some time to think about it. Days passed, and Jinho waited patiently for Nkem to give him a response, and she eventually agreed to allow him to court her. Her heart was sure he was the right person for her, and as time passed, news quickly spread about Jinho and Nkem. Out of jealousy, Urena stopped coming to the workshop as her love interest clearly preferred someone else. The villagers, on the other hand, gossiped endlessly about the new couple. Let her enjoy it while it lasts. He will leave the village soon, and she will return to her big books, some jealous maidens would say. Nkem and Jinho were unfazed by the whispers. They were fascinated by each other, and that was all that mattered. As their relationship grew stronger, Jinho knew he wanted to spend the rest of his life with Nkem, so he asked if she would consider marrying him. We can sail the world together and create wonderful memories, he said, in addition to his proposal. But Nkem frowned slightly. She knew their relationship was getting serious and probably headed to marriage, but she was unwilling to leave her home. Her parents were buried there. The kids she taught, her culture, her whole life was in OCC. Jinho saw her expression and retracted his words. Or we could set up our own home here in OCC. The herbalist and the teacher, he joked. He could not afford to lose her, and if it meant staying in OCC, he would. Nkem objected, asking that he not pause his life for her, but he was determined to spend the rest of his life with her. I can always travel and come back to you when the need arises, he said, and that sounded like a better balance for Nkem, so she hugged him in agreement. Wedding preparations quickly began. The spinster who nobody thought would ever be married had finally found her better half. Some maidens laughed at Jinho for refusing the younger maidens, but no one was as beautiful as Nkem in his eyes. He loved every bit of her. But amongst all the villagers, there was no one angrier than Urena. Jinho was the first man she had intentionally sought after, and he chose a spinster over her. She was furious and filled with jealousy, and she knew the exact thing to do to hurt him for rejecting her. 2 days to the marriage ceremony between Jinho and Nkem, the town crier went around informing the villagers of new information from the palace. The king has demanded we preserve our culture. Henceforth, we the indigents of Osisi will only marry from Osisi for a period of time. Failure to adhere to this rule will result in banishment, he announced. Urena was pleased. She narrated the issue to her father, the king, and asked him to issue a decree. The king loved his daughter so much and decided to grant her request long enough to frustrate Jinho, which would result in his exit from the village. If Urena could not have Jinho, nobody else from Osisi would. Nkem and Jinho were devastated by the news. They had to avoid being so close to each other to avoid problems with the king. But one thing was certain, their relationship was over. Their hearts ached when they saw each other. Jinho knew he also had to leave soon and he wanted to ask Nkem to come with him, but he knew how much she loved Osisi. Nkem, on the other hand, spent her time reading her father's books. She tried to take her mind away from how terrible she felt. One day, as she was cleaning her father's collections, she saw a map. She smiled warmly as she remembered her father's favorite words. Nkem, there is so much to see in this world, he would say. Then he would trace his fingers to the map of Nigeria and point to the eastern part. But you see, my dear, no matter where I go, my heart will always be here because of you and your mother. She jumped at the revelation. She had heard him say those things repeatedly, but now it made complete sense to her. She realized that her heart was with Jinho, and wherever he went, that would be her home. Nkem ran to his workshop and pulled him out for a conversation. I will go with you, Jinho, she said. Jinho took her hands in his, a mix of relief and sadness in his eyes. Nkem, are you sure? This is your home, your life, he said, and she nodded. They went straight to the palace to declare their decision, and Urena and two other chiefs were seated in the king's court conversing with the king when they arrived. Urena rolled her eyes in disgust when she saw them holding hands. Jinho addressed the king and thanked him for his hospitality. Then he informed them of their decision, and this made the princess visibly upset. My father, are you going to let them get away with disobeying your orders? Banishment is not enough. This man and his group should not be allowed to live with any herbs from Osisi, she said. And the king nodded in approval to his daughter's wishes. Nkem turned to Jinho. She tried to remove her hands from his because she knew the herbs were his life work and he wouldn't trade a lifetime with her for the herbs. But she was wrong. Jinho held her tightly and assured the king that he would not go with any of the herbs as he was determined to marry Nkem. Nkem felt a surge of pride and love for Jinho. She was further convinced that he was the man for her. They both left the palace as there was nothing that could be said against them. And when they got out, she said to him, "We will start over together, Jinho. We will find new herbs and continue your work. Together we can overcome anything." And Jinho nodded. He had no doubt in his heart. Neither did he think he was making a mistake. 2 days later, Nkem, Jinho, alongside his team, were ready to leave the village. People gathered to watch them, as well as Nkem's students. She hugged them farewell, but one student hugged her more tightly, almost refusing to let go. It was Ada, the only female student in her class. "Nne, I'm going to be a teacher like you one day," Ada said to Nkem. Nkem's heart was so warm. She was glad her time in the village mattered. "Ada, you will make a fantastic teacher," she responded. Eventually, she boarded the ship with Jinho, and as they sailed far away from Osisi, someone from the team came up to them and said, "We found several bags of the herbs we worked with at the bottom of the ship." Nkem and Jinho both ran to see it. They carefully examined the herbs and found a letter. It was from the king. In the letter, he thanked Jinho for helping out with his herbal concoctions and apologized for what had happened as there were situations beyond his control. He also mentioned that Chief Ike put in a good word for Jinho to thank him again for the sleeping herbs. And as for Nkem, our beautiful daughter of Osisi, in a year, I will lift the banishment and reverse the law. You will always be welcomed here. May God bless your union." The king knew his daughter was a spoiled brat, but he also did not want to hurt her feelings. So he agreed to make a temporary decision to make Urenna happy. Nkem and Jinho hugged each other in excitement, happy they chose themselves. And so, with hearts full of hope and love, they set off to build a new life together, knowing that wherever they went, they were home. I hope this story serves as a reminder that people should not settle just because they have not found what they desire yet, whether it's in relationships, career, or general life decisions. Whatever it may be, I pray that the Lord will grant your desires according to His will. Thank you for listening to this story today. It's quite different, but I hope you liked it. Please let me know what you learned in the comment section. And if you enjoyed it, please like and share with your loved ones. Till next time. Bye.